Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Hebrews. Today we're still looking at Hebrews chapter 5, verse 6. Now the author of Hebrews has been talking about Jesus as our great high priest. And yesterday we saw this verse where he says, his priesthood is in the order of Melchizedek. Chapter 5, verse 6. He says in another place, you are a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek. Now Jesus is our high priest, but he is not a high priest according to the Levitical system. Jesus was not of the tribe of Levi, and he was not descended from the family of Aaron. And in the Old Testament, of course, all the priests are of the tribe of Levi. They are part of the family of Aaron, Moses' brother. Aaron, you recall, was the first high priest. But Jesus' priesthood is different. He is in the order of Melchizedek, which is an eternal priesthood. Notice it says, you are a priest forever. Now, Melchizedek is mentioned here in this verse, chapter 5, verse 6, and it will be mentioned again in chapter 5 toward the end of the chapter. Once again, we'll talk about the order of Melchizedek. And then in chapter 7, he will spend a lot of time talking about Melchizedek and how Jesus was a priest in the order of Melchizedek. So we'll return to this in chapter 7 with some great detail given to it. But right now we're asking the question, who was Melchizedek? We see that Jesus' priesthood was different from that of the tribe of Levi. It was different from the Aaronic priesthood. But who was Melchizedek? And why is he a priest? Well, we meet him in the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 14, during the time of Abraham. Now, Abraham has been living in the central part of the promised land, the land that God has told him one day will belong to all of your descendants. You remember Lot, Abraham's nephew, had moved and begun to live in Sodom. Well, in chapter 14 of Genesis, we're told about a coalition of kings from the northeast who attack Sodom and Gomorrah and overwhelm the cities and take many of their people away as captives. They're heading back to the northeast. Lot and his family are among the captives. Abraham receives word of this, and so he rallies his men, and he rallies some allies he has made in that region of Canaan, and they pursue these kings and defeat them. They totally overwhelm them, and they rescue Lot and his family and all the captives of Sodom and bring them back home. And while Abraham is coming back and bringing the rescued captives, we are introduced to Melchizedek. He just sort of pops up in the story. It's in Genesis chapter 14, verse 18. Abraham is returning from his military victory, and it says, then Melchizedek, who is the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. And he blessed Abraham, crying, blessed be Abraham by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. So Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. So this is the only time we meet Melchizedek in all of the scripture. He's talked about here, and he's never mentioned before or after. Now, he's referenced in Psalm 110 in a messianic prophecy that Jesus will be a priest after Melchizedek. And he's mentioned again as we've seen obviously in Hebrews chapter 5 and then again in Hebrews chapter 7. But as far as a narrative about him, this in Genesis 14 is the only time we meet him. We're told he's the king of Salem, which will later be called Jerusalem. But most importantly, we're told he is a priest of God Most High. He is a priest of the Lord. And he blesses Abraham. As a priest, he performs a priestly ministry. Very unusual character. We're going to talk more about him in detail when we get to chapter 7. But he sort of pops up. We've never seen him before. We won't see him again. But he's a priest of the Lord. And he pronounces a blessing upon Abraham, whom God has just given that great victory. And Abraham gives him a tithe of the plunder, recognizing his priesthood. So what we know about Melchizedek is he is a king. He's the king of Salem, Jerusalem. But more importantly for our discussion today, he is a priest of the Lord who gives blessing to Abraham. And so Hebrews would say Jesus is our great high priest, like Melchizedek was a priest. It's not part of the Levitical priesthood, which was temporary. You know, in the Levitical system, a priest would be a priest for his life and then it would pass to someone else. But the priesthood of Melchizedek is forever. That's what the Psalm says. That's what Hebrews says. You're a priest forever. So this priesthood is an eternal priesthood. And so Jesus' priesthood was not just for a time, but for eternity. He is a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Join us tomorrow as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Hebrews.